Usually when we talk about being exhausted, we kind of just want a really simple mechanical fix.
Oh, totally. A quick fix.
Right. But before we even get to that, and I want to welcome you, the learner, to this deep dive, I want you to think about how you're feeling right now. If you are listening to this, whether you're gripping the steering wheel in horrible traffic or, mindlessly folding a mountain of laundry.
We're just staring at the ceiling fan at 2 in the morning.
Yes, exactly. If that's you, you probably live in a modern culture that is just entirely defined by acceleration. I mean, we exist in this relentless, almost punishing drive for self-sufficiency.
We really do. We treat ourselves like smartphones, basically.
Yes. It's like when we feel exhausted, we look at our own internal battery icon, right? We see it flashing red in the top right corner of our minds, and we think the solution is perfectly binary. We just need to plug in.
And it's a deeply comforting model, isn't it? Like we crave things to be quantifiable. We want human life to be neatly categorized into just 2 distinct folders.
Outputting energy or recharging energy.
Right. You deplete the battery through labor, you plug into the wall via a vacation or a weekend nap, the battery returns to 100%, and then you just go right back to outputting.
But then you actually step into the reality of the human experience. You step into human psychology and our spiritual reality, and suddenly that simple charging cable is visibly broken.
Oh, completely severed.
Right. We're looking at a landscape of modern exhaustion that is just incredibly murky. I mean, think about it. We try to unplug. We go on that really expensive vacation. We sleep in until noon on a Saturday. We binge watch an entire season of a show just to turn our brains off.
Yeah, to numb out.
And yet we wake up on Monday morning feeling just as tired, just as hollow. The battery indicator is still flashing red, but the charger isn't working.
Well, because we are attempting a mechanical solution for what is fundamentally a deeply spiritual diagnosis.
Yeah.
When we try to fix a fractured soul with a nap, we're basically misunderstanding the entire architecture of how we were built to function.
Exactly. And honestly, that is the core mission of our deep dive today. For the next hour or so, I want to invite you, the listener, to just step completely off the treadmill.
Just hit pause.
Yeah. We're going to do a massive teardown operation here. We are leaning exclusively on this incredible source text today. It's called Divine Rest and Worship by Chris R. Villasis. And we are here to dismantle the modern assumption that rest is merely a reward for your productivity.
Or just a biological necessity, to repair your muscles so you can be a better worker bee for the company on Monday.
Right. We are exploring the original ancient concept of the Sabbath. We're going to see how it is actually about communion, about radical trust, and about really understanding what a human life is fundamentally designed to do.
And what's fascinating here is that modern people tend to view the concept of Sabbath in really just one of 2 ways.
Yeah.
It's either completely dismissed as this irrelevant historical footnote for ancient agrarians, or it's viewed as a deeply oppressive, archaic rule, like just a rigid list of things you aren't allowed to do on a Sunday.
The ultimate buzzkill day.
Exactly. But true Sabbath is neither of those things. It is a theological signpost. It's this massive, blinking arrow pointing directly to the ultimate purpose of human existence.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because there is a profound irony in what we're about to do here.
Oh, for sure.
We are embarking on a deep dive about resting, but to actually understand it, it's going to require immense active engagement from you, the listener. We basically have to do the heavy intellectual lifting to understand how to actually stop lifting.
It's the great paradox of the human condition, right? We have so thoroughly forgotten how to rest that we have to rigorously study it just to remember what it even looks like.
Yeah, that's so true. So to understand how we lost this ability, we can't start with modern history. We can't even start with ancient human history.
No, you have to go much further back.
Right. We have to start before time itself existed. We have to look at eternity and then the very dawn of creation just to see what rest looked like before we entirely ruined it.
So the foundational reality we have to wrap our minds around is the state of God before creation. Before a single star was formed, before matter existed, God lacked absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all.
Right. He was already perfectly complete, perfectly joyful, and entirely full in himself.
Which completely shatters our human paradigm of what rest even means. Because if God was already complete, he didn't create the universe because he was lonely or because he needed a workforce.
Precisely. And this changes how we define the phrase divine rest. Because when we hear that God rested, our immediate, flawed human instinct is to project our own biological limitations onto the Creator.
Right. We think of the marathon runner.
Exactly. You run 26 miles, your muscles are completely depleted of glycogen, you're gasping for air, you cross the finish line and you just collapse onto the pavement. You rest because you lack energy. But God has no glycogen stores to deplete. He does not experience fatigue.
So when the ancient texts say God rested on the seventh day of creation, it have absolutely zero to do with him needing a breather.
Zero. In the ancient Near Eastern context, divine rest signals something far more majestic. It signals royal enthronement.
Oh, wow. Royal enthronement.
Yeah, it's the posture of a king who has ordered his kingdom perfectly, vanquished any chaos, and is now taking his seat on the throne to rule in absolute peace and delight.
I love that. Let's use an analogy to really anchor this for the listener. Imagine a master painter, right? Someone who has spent years working on this sprawling, breathtaking fresco on the ceiling of a grand cathedral.
Okay, I can picture that.
They've mixed every color, they've planned every geometric angle, painstakingly applied the pigment, and finally they place the very last stroke of gold leaf on the plaster. What do they do next?
Right, they don't just fall over.
No, they don't collapse in a heap because their arm is tired. They take a deliberate step back, they put down the brush, and they just stand there, looking up.
They're delighting in the finished masterpiece.
Exactly. They are existing in the presence of this beautiful thing they've made. They stop painting, not because they are out of energy, but because adding even one more brushstroke would ruin the perfection of the work.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. The work is perfectly complete, so the only appropriate response is delight. And this brings us directly into the mechanics of Genesis chapters 1 and 2.
The creation narrative?
Right. After 6 days of ordering the cosmos, God enters this state of royal delight on the seventh day. And he does something unprecedented. He sanctifies time itself. He makes the seventh day holy.
Which proves that the Sabbath is not a Jewish invention from the book of Exodus. It predates the nation of Israel. It predates Moses. It predates sin.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it means that this rhythm of work and rest is woven into the very fabric of the universe. It is as fundamental to reality as gravity or the laws of thermodynamics or the changing of the seasons. And humanity was created in the image of God, which means part of bearing that image is participating in his structural reality. To ignore rest is not just to break a religious rule, it is to swim against the literal current of the cosmos.
So we were designed for this rhythm from day one. Work and then holy rest. Stewardship of the earth, followed by adoration of the Creator.
Yes, and we actually see this in the specific language used to describe human purpose in the Garden of Eden. In Genesis 2, humanity is placed in the garden to, quote, work it and keep it.
Which, in modern English, that just sounds like landscaping, right? It sounds like agricultural labor.
Right. Pull the weeds, harvest the apples, trim the hedges.
Yeah, exactly.
But when we look at the original ancient Hebrew, the words used for work and keep, abad and shamar, are heavily loaded terms. They are priestly imagery.
Wait, really? Priestly imagery?
Yeah. Later on in the biblical narrative, those exact same two words are used almost exclusively to describe the duties of the priests serving in the Holy Tabernacle.
That is wild. So the original readers would have heard work and keep and immediately pictured a priest in a temple, not a farmer in a field.
Exactly. The Garden of Eden was never just a farm. It was a cosmic sanctuary. It was a temple where the dimensions of heaven and earth perfectly overlapped.
Yeah.
Therefore, the labor of humanity in the garden was not just physical survival, it was priestly service.
Man, that completely changes the picture.
It does. And the rest in the garden was not just a break from physical exertion, it was effortless communion in the presence of the divine.
That completely flips how we view our weekends. Most of us view our time off as a desperate escape from reality. We say things like, I just need a drink and a beach to get away from it all.
Right, we want to numb out.
Yeah. But what you were saying is that the original design of rest wasn't an escape from reality. It was an entry into the truest reality.
Yes. Rest was designed to be the moment you step back, look at the work of your hands, and commune with the God who made it all possible. The work was joyful, and the rest was holy.
Okay, but let's be brutally honest here. If you are listening to this right now, that description of joyful work and holy rest probably sounds like absolute science fiction.
It really does. It sounds impossible.
We are profoundly exhausted. We hate our alarms on Monday morning, and we spend our weekends dreading the return to the office. We are alienated from our labor, and we are alienated from our rest. So, If this perfect rhythm was woven into the fabric of the universe, how did we get so utterly derailed?
Well, this brings us to the fracture, the fall of humanity, as detailed in Genesis 3. When humanity rebels against God, deciding they want to be their own authority, they don't just break a rule. They sever the communion that powered the entire system.
The temple is shattered.
The temple is completely shattered.
And the immediate consequence of that shattered communion directly impacts our work.
Instantly, the ground is cursed. Work, which was designed to be a joyful priestly stewardship, suddenly becomes marked by toil, by sweat, by frustration. The narrative uses the imagery of thorns and thistles. The earth will now fight back, your labor will be agonizing, and it will often feel futile.
And because our relationship to work is broken, our relationship to rest is instantly broken along with it.
Exactly. Because the core rupture is a separation from the presence of God, human beings suddenly feel a terrifying void. And we immediately try to fill that void. We start chasing rest in all the wrong places.
Like where?
Well, we try to find peace by acquiring massive amounts of wealth, thinking like a large enough bank account will finally let us relax. Or we try to control our environments and the people around us. Or we dive into endless, mindless escapism.
And none of it works. The battery stays red.
It cannot work.
Uh,
Mechanical solutions cannot fix a ruptured soul. And when we look at the psychological fallout of this rupture, according to Velazquez's work, we see humanity falling into two very distinct traps, two false rests.
I want to spend some serious time here because I guarantee that everyone listening will recognize themselves or someone they love in one of these two categories. So what is the first false rest?
The first false rest is overwork. When sin severs our connection to God, it produces a profound internal restlessness. A person realizes deep down that they are not secure, so they try to manufacture their own security.
Right.
They simply never stop working because, fundamentally, they were trying to justify their own existence.
So it's the belief that I am what I produce.
Right.
If I am closing deals, if I am getting promoted, if I am the most reliable person in my family, then I have value. But the terrifying inverse of that is, if I stop producing, my worth drops to zero.
Yes, it is an attempt to build your own salvation through your labor. You maintain absolute control. If you pause, if you actually rest, the void catches up to you.
Yeah.
You are forced to face the reality that you are not holding the universe together, so you just keep running.
I hear that, but let me push back for the person listening who is currently working 2 jobs. If I'm listening to this on my commute to my second shift, I'm probably thinking, I'm not trying to build my own spiritual salvation, I'm trying to pay my mortgage. Eggs are ridiculously expensive, rent is up, inflation is crushing me.
Right.
It's not a theological rebellion, it's a practical economic necessity to survive. So how do we differentiate between survival and this spiritual rebellion of overwork?
That is a vital distinction, and it's so important not to spiritualize genuine poverty or systemic economic hardship. Working hard to provide for your family is honorable and necessary.
Right.
The diagnostic difference really lies in the internal posture. When the second job is done, when the bills are paid, can you actually stop? Or does the anxiety remain? The spiritual rebellion of overwork is marked by an inability to detach your identity from your output.
Oh, I see.
Even a billionaire can suffer from this false rest of overwork if they believe their fundamental worth requires one more acquisition. It is about the soul's frantic need for control.
That makes a lot of sense. The inability to stop, even when the basic needs are met, reveals the idolatry. Okay, so that is the first false rest, overwork. What is the second?
The second false rest is the exact opposite reaction to the brokenness of the world. It is idleness.
Which from the outside might just look like resting, right?
It looks exactly like resting, but internally, it is a state of total despair. People withdraw into idleness, not out of a holy delight in the finished work, but because they have completely lost hope. They look at the thorns and thistles, they realize the system is broken, they see that their labor often feels futile, and so they cynically withdraw. They just check out.
It's like the ultimate form of quiet quitting, but applied to your entire existence. You just give up on trying to cultivate anything meaningful.
Yes, and the theological reality we are uncovering here is that both of these extremes, frantic overwork to prove your worth and hopeless idleness because you think nothing has worth, are twin symptoms of the exact same disease. They are signs of a disordered soul.
Wow.
The fall of humanity turned the concept of rest into a brutal battlefield between trust and unbelief.
So we have humanity exiled from the garden, wandering through history in this fractured state, right? Oscillating between working ourselves to death and giving up completely. And this brings us to a massive turning point in the historical narrative, the Sinai Desert.
Right, the giving of the law.
Yeah. The people of Israel have just been miraculously liberated from hundreds of years of brutal, multi-generational slavery in Egypt. They are standing at the foot of Mount Sinai. God gives them the covenant, the 10 Commandments, and right there, smack in the middle of prohibitions against murder and idolatry, is a command to take a day off.
It is a spectacular moment. The Sabbath is formally codified into law. But to really grasp the depth of what is happening here, we have to look closely at how this law is justified in the text. In the Torah, the 10 Commandments are actually listed twice, once in the book of Exodus and once in the book of Deuteronomy.
And the reason given for the Sabbath changes between the two books, doesn't it?
It does, and that changes everything. In Exodus chapter 20, the command to keep the Sabbath is rooted directly in creation. The text says, "For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth and rested on the seventh day."
So it's pointing backward to the original design of the cosmos.
Exactly. But later, in Deuteronomy chapter 5, when Moses is reiterating the law to the next generation right before they enter the Promised Land, the grounding changes. The text roots the Sabbath in redemption.
Redemption from Egypt.
Yes. It says, "You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand. Therefore the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day."
Creation and redemption. God made the world and God rescues slaves.
Both pillars are absolutely essential to understanding true rest. Think about the psychology of the people receiving this command. For 400 years, their entire identity was tied to making bricks for Pharaoh.
They were literal cogs in a massive ancient industrial machine.
A machine that never ever stopped. There were no weekends in ancient Egypt. You woke up, you made bricks, you slept, you woke up, you made bricks. Your value was entirely tied to your daily production quota.
And now, the God of the universe is giving them a radically new identity. He is telling them they are no longer defined by endless labor under a tyrant. They are a redeemed people. And the physical proof of their redemption is that they are commanded to stop working for an entire day every single week.
Which must have been terrifying for them at first.
Seriously, if you have only ever known a life where stopping means you get whipped or you starve, being told to stop by the ultimate authority is a massive test of trust.
It is the ultimate test. It asks the question, do you really believe I rescued you? And do you really believe I will provide for you while you rest?
Let's bring this directly to the modern listener. We boast about our modern freedom, right? We don't live in ancient Egypt. We don't have taskmasters with whips. But look at your calendar. Look at your inbox. Think about the invisible expectations you place on yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
We have completely internalized the slave driver. Isn't it entirely possible that your unyielding schedule is just a new pharaoh? We think we are free, but we are absolutely terrified to take 24 hours off from producing, consuming, networking, and achieving. If you cannot stop, are you really free, or are you just a highly paid brickmaker?
That is a stinging question, but it gets to the heart of the matter. True Sabbath rest is an act of profound political and spiritual rebellion. It is a weekly insurrection against the systems of this world that want to commodify your existence.
A weekly insurrection. I love that phrasing.
And this rebellion has incredibly practical social consequences in the biblical text.
Let's dig into that, because this command wasn't just a private spiritual retreat for the wealthy landowner, right? The Sabbath law had massive societal implications.
Yes, the law specifically mandates that the rest applies to everyone. It lists sons, daughters, male and female servants, the foreigners living among them, and even the livestock.
Even the animals. I mean, the ancient world did not have labor unions. The idea of granting a mandatory day of rest to a servant, let alone a foreigner or an ox, is radically progressive for the ancient Near East.
It is entirely unprecedented. It actively resists the exploitation that is so deeply embedded in fallen human economics. In this framework, Sabbath is worship with profound social consequences. You cannot claim to honor the Creator while simultaneously working His creation, whether that's your employee, your servant, or your beast of burden, into the ground.
Wow.
True worship forces a reshaping of power dynamics and justice.
It acts as an equalizer. For one day a week, the wealthy landowner and the hired hand are in the exact same position. They both stop. They both acknowledge that they are creatures, entirely dependent on the provision of the same Creator. No one has an economic advantage on the Sabbath.
Which naturally leads us to see how this principle was supposed to scale. The Sabbath was never meant to be contained to just one day a week. It was designed to shape the entire architectural structure of the society.
But humanity has an incredibly poor track record of following instructions. especially when those instructions involve giving up control. What happens when a society stubbornly refuses to rest?
We see the answer to that in the broader kingdom vision for Israel and their subsequent failure. The weekly Sabbath principle was expanded into sabbatical years. Every seventh year, the entire nation was commanded to let the agricultural land lie fallow. No planting seeds, no pruning vineyards, no organized harvesting.
Okay, stop right there. That sounds completely insane from an economic standpoint.
Right, it sounds like economic suicide.
You are talking about an agrarian society that survives on what it grows. To take a full year off from agricultural output requires an unimaginable level of trust. If I told a modern tech worker to completely delete their LinkedIn, shut down their laptop for a year, and just trust that God would provide their career and their meals at the end of it, they would have a literal panic attack. The sheer terror of giving up that control.
It is terrifying because it directly attacks what Velazquez calls the myth of autonomy.
The myth of autonomy. Let's unpack that.
The myth of autonomy is the deeply held, arrogant belief that says, I built this. This land is mine. This time is mine. I am the master of my fate. My security is guaranteed by my own two hands. The command to let the land rest for a year is God's way of interrupting that myth. It trains the people to view time and land as gifts, not as possessions they have conquered.
And it went even further than the seventh year, right? There's the year of Jubilee.
Yes, the Jubilee. After 7 cycles of 7 years. So, the 50th year, a massive societal reset was commanded. Debts were to be entirely canceled. Slaves were to be freed. And crucially, ancestral property that had been sold off due to poverty was to be returned to its original family.
Like, let's dramatize that for the listener so we can really feel the weight of it. Imagine waking up on January 1st of the Jubilee year. You had previously lost your business, you had to sell your family home to pay off medical debts, and you are currently working 3 jobs just to survive.
You take a terrible situation.
Yeah. But suddenly the bank calls you. They tell you your mortgage is entirely forgiven, your debt is wiped out, and the deed to your family home has been transferred back to your name, free and clear, simply because the calendar struck a certain year. It is a complete reset of the economic playing field.
It is breathtaking justice. The kingdom ideal was that God's reign would perfectly order life, work, land, and worship. The land belongs to God, time belongs to God, and the people belong to God. We are just stewards.
But of course, Israel couldn't do it. They looked at the neighboring nations who were planting crops every year and getting rich. They looked at the threat of drought. They looked at their own bank accounts and they said, we can't afford to take a year off. We can't afford to forgive these debts. We need to stay in control.
They bought into the myth of autonomy.
And the historical consequences of that refusal are catastrophic. It leads directly to the concept of exile.
It does.
So what exactly happens?
In texts like Leviticus 26 and 2 Chronicles 36, exile is described as one of the most severe judgments in the biblical narrative. The prophets explicitly connect the nation's covenant unfaithfulness, specifically their failure to observe the sabbatical years with their impending doom.
Oh, wow.
Because the people stubbornly refuse to give the land its God-ordained rest, God evicts them. He sends them into exile in Babylon so that the land can finally forcibly, quote, receive its Sabbaths.
It's a staggering thought. Let's use a medical analogy to capture what is happening here on a massive national scale.
Okay, let's hear.
If you push your physical body to the absolute brink, say you decide to work 100-hour winds for months on end, you sleep 3 hours a night, you survive entirely on black coffee and sheer adrenaline, you ignore every warning sign.
You're going to crash.
Exactly. Eventually, your biological system will intervene. You will collapse. You will contract a severe illness, or you will end up hospitalized. Your body will force you into a state of rest, whether you agree to it or not. It seems like God applied this exact same biological principle to the geographic land of Israel. They wouldn't voluntarily take the time off, so God forcibly gave the land a 70-year vacation by removing the inhabitants.
That analogy maps perfectly onto the historical reality. The land was exhausted. The spiritual fabric of the nation was exhausted. And so, the forced rest of exile occurs. But we must understand the deepest pain of this exile. It wasn't just about losing their farms or their political sovereignty. It was what we can call liturgical alienation.
Liturgical alienation, meaning their ability to worship collectively in the presence of God at the temple was entirely severed.
Yes. The people who were originally created in Eden to live in communion with God in a sacred space are now scattered, disordered, and living under the thumb of a pagan empire in Babylon. Sabbath changes from a joyful, present reality into a painful memory and a distant, desperate hope.
There's a haunting line in Psalm 137. The Israelites are sitting by the rivers of Babylon, their captors are mocking them, and they cry out, "How can we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land?" It is a cry of absolute heartbreak. They finally realize the magnitude of what they lost when they refused to trust God.
The exile exposes a fundamental, unchangeable truth. True rest is only possible where God dwells with his people. You cannot have the rest of God without the presence of God. You can have inactivity, but you cannot have rest.
But the narrative doesn't end in Babylon. God doesn't just leave them in a state of endless, miserable exile.
No, it leads directly to the prophetic hope. Prophets like Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel begin to envision a grand restoration. But this restoration is much deeper than just political liberation or rebuilding a stone temple in Jerusalem.
Right, because if God just hit the reset button and put them back in the land with the exact same system, human nature dictates they would eventually fail again.
Precisely. The true restoration, according to the prophets, had to address the root disease, the human heart. It had to deal with the core problem of sin itself. In this prophetic context, the Sabbath becomes an eschatological sign.
Eschatological. For the listener who doesn't spend their weekends reading theology textbooks, let's ground that word. What does that actually mean?
It means it points forward to the ultimate end of history. Think of it like a weekly movie trailer for the eternal kingdom. Every Sabbath becomes a weekly promise that God is not finished yet. The rest he began in the Garden of Eden and preserved to the laws of Sinai will ultimately be completed in a final act of redemption.
Which sets the stage flawlessly for the arrival of the Messiah. Jesus steps right out of the pages of this prophetic hope, directly into the absolute center of a massive controversy surrounding the Sabbath in the first century.
He does. You cannot understand the ministry of Jesus without understanding his relationship to the Sabbath. He doesn't abolish the concept of divine rest. He fulfills it.
In the Gospel of Mark chapter 2, Jesus makes this breathtaking declaration. He says, "The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath."
Which is an audacious claim of divine authority. He is saying that the Sabbath belongs to him because he is the very person to whom every single Sabbath day since the Garden of Eden has always been pointing.
And he doesn't just make the claim, he backs it up through intensely provocative actions. He intentionally heals people on the Sabbath day. And if you read the Gospels, this absolutely infuriates the religious leaders of his day, the Pharisees.
We really need to understand the environment Jesus walked into. By the first century, the religious leaders had taken the beautiful, liberating command to rest, and they had weaponized it. They built a suffocating fortress of legalism around it.
I want to dive into the specifics of this because it highlights exactly how humanity ruins good things. What did this legalism actually look like for an average person living in that time?
It was exhausting. The Pharisees had developed dozens of microscopic categories of what constituted work. For example, you were forbidden from tying certain types of knots on the Sabbath. You couldn't write more than 2 letters of the alphabet.
2 letters? Are you kidding?
No, literal letters of the alphabet. There were strict limits on exactly how many steps you could take from your home. If a woman had a sewing needle stuck in her garment, she could be accused of carrying a burden, which was considered work.
Imagine the psychological terror of that.
Yeah.
You are supposed to be experiencing a day of joyful communion with God, and instead, you are pacing your living room, terrified that if you take 1 too many steps or accidentally tie your sandal the wrong way, you are breaking the cosmic law of the universe. It turns rest into a high-stakes performance.
It entirely destroyed the purpose of the day. And so Jesus intentionally steps into this environment and heals a man with a withered hand or a crippled woman on the Sabbath. He does it to reveal the day's true meaning. The Sabbath was made for mercy, for life, for restoration. Christ's actions expose the suffocating legalism of the Pharisees and restore the day to its original design, delighting in God's saving goodness. He is forcefully untangling the knot that human religion had made out of God's gift.
And this brings us to what might be one of the most famous and most misunderstood invitations in all of history. Matthew chapter 11. Jesus says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest."
This is the ultimate Sabbath text. But we need to be incredibly precise about what Jesus is actually offering here.
Let's do that, because when my modern, exhausted brain hears Jesus say, "I will give you rest," I immediately project my own desires onto him. I think, oh, excellent. Jesus is offering me a spiritual spa day. He's offering me a magical sense of emotional zen, or he's going to intervene and make my boss stop emailing me on Friday nights.
Right, but that is not what he is offering. The rest Jesus offers is not merely a lighter calendar or temporary emotional relief. He is offering reconciliation with God.
Back to the garden.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Remember, the root cause of our exhaustion, going all the way back to the fracture in Eden, is our separation from the Creator. The battery is dead because we are unplugged from the source of life.
Yeah.
Jesus is offering to fix the root cause.
But the way he offers it is so counterintuitive. He follows it up by saying, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." A yoke is a heavy wooden beam you strap across the necks of two oxen so they can pull a massive plow through a field. It is a literal instrument of labor. How on earth does he offer rest by handing us a yoke?
It is a brilliant metaphor. He is acknowledging that as humans, we are always going to be yoked to something. We're always going to serve something.
Oh, wow.
But the reason his yoke is easy is not because Christian discipleship is shallow or devoid of effort. It is because obedience under the lordship of Christ is life lived in step with truth.
Ah, I see.
When you are yoked to Christ, you are no longer pulling the crushing plow of self-justification. You aren't trying to earn your worth. You are pulling alongside the one who has already accomplished the work.
Which brings us to the ultimate climax of the entire biblical narrative, the cross and the resurrection. This is the definitive Sabbath event.
On the cross, Jesus enters the absolute depth of human misery. He takes on the curse of the thorns and thistles. He takes on the exhaustion, the alienation, and the judgment of the fall.
He does the agonizing work of redemption.
He does the work. He declares it is finished. And then he rests in the tomb on the Sabbath day. And when he rises on Sunday morning, the first day of the week, he inaugurates the new creation. His empty tomb becomes the threshold of rest fulfilled and life renewed. The finished work of redemption is the absolute, unshakable foundation of Christian rest. You cannot have true rest without trusting in the finished work of the cross.
Okay, but here is where we run into a massive tension. We move from the resurrection into the era of the early church, which is where you and I live today. Theologians call this the already not yet. We have the finished work of Christ, the already, but we are still living in a broken world full of disease, bills, and death, the not yet. And the early church seems to struggle immensely with how to practice the Sabbath in this in-between space.
It is a complex transition. The New Testament presents both a continuity with the Old Testament Sabbath and a radical transformation of it.
Why? Because you have seemingly conflicting advice from the biblical writers. On one hand, you have the Apostle Paul in the book of Colossians, violently warning believers against legalistic calendar observance. He says basically, "Do not let anyone judge you regarding a Sabbath day. These are just a shadow of the things to come, but the substance belongs to Christ."
Paul is attacking the Pharisaical mindset. He is violently opposed to the idea that a Christian could earn righteousness by performing a 24-hour ritual of inactivity. The shadow is past, the reality of Christ has arrived.
But then on the other hand, you have the writer of the book of Hebrews. In Hebrews chapter 4, it explicitly says, "So then, there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God." And then it adds, "For whoever has entered God's rest has also rested from his works as God did from his." I need you to clarify this for me because this feels like a paradox. How does this actually work in practice? How can we simultaneously rest from our works and yet still be active, productive members of a society? Am I supposed to stop working or not?
It is the central paradox of the Christian life. When the writer of Hebrews says we rest from our works, he is not calling us to physical inactivity or laziness. He means we are ceasing from self-justifying labor.
Self-justifying labor, trying to prove we are enough.
Exactly. You completely stop trying to earn your salvation, your fundamental worth, or your identity through your moral performance or your economic output. You trust completely in God's provision in Christ. But here is the beautiful part. Resting from the desperate need to justify yourself actually frees you to do genuine loving work.
Oh, that makes total sense. When I am not frantically trying to save myself, my eyes are finally lifted off my own belly button. I can actually look at my neighbor and serve them because I don't need to extract any worth from them.
Exactly. And for the church, this Sabbath-shaped living becomes a public witness to the watching world. The church gathers on the Lord's Day Sunday, the day of resurrection, to celebrate and proclaim that the new age has already begun.
So Sunday isn't just the weekend, it's a miniature version of the eternal kingdom dropping into our present timeline.
That's right. The local church gathering is not an interruption of its mission in the world. Worship is the very fountain of the mission. When the church gathers to hear the word, to break bread, to sing, and to confess, they are drinking deeply from the source of rest, so they can pour it out during the week in their workplaces and neighborhoods.
So we've seen the eternal past of the Sabbath, the historical reality in Israel, the fulfillment in Jesus, and the tension of the church today, but we still haven't reached the end. The ancient concept insists that the Sabbath is eschatological. How does this all culminate? Where is the timeline of human history actually going? And what are the immediate dangers for the person listening to this right now who is trying to navigate this?
To understand the future, we have to heed a very severe warning in the present. If we go back to Hebrews chapter 3, the writer warns the church against unbelief and the hardening of hearts. He references the generation of Israelites who died wandering in the wilderness because they refused to trust God to bring them into the promised land.
Which highlights that refusing God's rest is not just a scheduling error. It's not just poor time management.
No, it is a profound moral failure. It is an issue of the heart. Refusing to rest is preferring self-rule to grace. It is preferring your present appetite for control over future glory. Fundamentally, refusing to rest is an idolatry of self-salvation. It is you looking at the Creator and saying, I do not trust you to hold my universe together, so I must do it myself.
That is a terrifying diagnosis of our modern busyness. But the narrative moves from that warning into a glorious promise of the future. It talks about the millennium and the new creation.
Yes. Within certain theological frameworks, the millennium is seen as a historical manifestation of Christ's righteous reign on earth. A world truly ruled by Christ is a world where justice, peace, and perfectly ordered rhythms are the norm. Divine rule and divine rest are not opposites, they produce each other.
And then beyond that, we reach the ultimate end of the timeline. Revelation chapter 21, the new creation, the eternal Sabbath.
This is the consummation of the entire cosmic narrative. And we have to be clear, this is not some endless floating boredom where you sit on a cloud playing a harp for 10 trillion years.
Thank goodness, because that sounds exhausting in its own right.
Right. It is life in perfected, embodied communion with God and each other. The curse of Genesis 3, the thorns and thistles, is finally entirely removed. Labor is no longer painful or alienated. Worship is no longer intermittent, squeezed into an hour on Sunday morning between soccer practices. Rest is no longer precarious, constantly threatened by Monday's looming deadlines.
It's unbroken fellowship, delighted participation in the glory of God forever. The tree of life returns, the river of life flows. History is fulfilled.
That is the ultimate destination. But while we wait for that destination, we are navigating a minefield. We face distinct modern dangers that trap us and pull us away from this rest. Velazquez points out 5 specific traps we need to identify.
Let's walk through these because this is where the theology hits the pavement for the listener. What is the first trap?
The first danger is legalism. This is the Pharisaical trap. It is turning the Sabbath into a rigid badge of righteousness, a performance to judge others by. When rest becomes just another rule you have to perfectly execute to prove you are a good Christian, it entirely ceases to be rest. It becomes another form of exhausting, self-justifying labor.
You're just exchanging a corporate treadmill for a religious treadmill. Okay, what is the second danger?
The second is the exact opposite error, antinomian neglect.
Define antinomian for us.
Antinomian literally means anti-law. It is the danger of dismissing the Sabbath altogether as just some irrelevant Old Testament rule that doesn't apply to modern, grace-filled people. It is like someone throwing away the structural blueprints to a house because they think they already know how to build it, only to be shocked when the roof caves in on them. To dismiss the rhythm of rest is to miss something absolutely essential about how you were designed to function.
The third trap is the one I really want to zero in on. It's called mere productivity culture, or practical atheism. Let's spend some time here.
Many people today don't actively reject the Sabbath philosophically. They don't hate the idea of rest. They just live practically as though God doesn't exist. Their lives are consumed by endless labor, entertainment overload, and constant, unceasing digital noise. They act as if their own productivity is the only thing keeping the world spinning.
Practical atheism. I want to speak directly to you, the learner, right now. You might have all the right theology in your head. You might verbally confess that God is sovereign, that Christ's work is finished, that grace is a free gift. But I challenge you to look at your calendar. Look at your weekly screen time reports. Look at your inability to sit in a quiet room for 10 minutes without reaching into your pocket for your device to stimulate your brain. Does your actual lived life look like you believe God is in control? Or does your life look like you believe you have to hold your own universe together? That is what practical atheism is. It is confessing God with your mouth, but entirely denying him with your schedule.
It is a profoundly sobering mirror to look into. We are so easily distracted into practical atheism.
Okay, what about the fourth danger? The text calls it empty formalism. Wait, so you're saying I could strictly turn off my phone, not answer any emails, sit on my couch all Sunday, and still fail at Sabbath? Because that just sounds like a normal day off to me. What am I missing?
You are missing the presence of God. Empty formalism means keeping the day, but missing the Lord of the day. You might go through the motions, you might attend a church service, come home, take a nap, and refuse to do any physical labor. But if your heart is completely disconnected, if there's no communion, no delight in the Creator, then Sabbath without worship is just a hollow shell. It is the shell without the nut. It's a day off, but it is not holy rest.
And the final, fifth danger.
Mystical vagueness. This is treating rest as just a generic feeling of calm or some ungrounded, personalized spirituality. It is the person who says, oh, my Sabbath is just taking a walk in the woods and feeling peaceful energy. Or my Sabbath is playing golf. A walk in the woods is wonderful, but biblical rest is not vague. It is covenantal. It is deeply grounded in God's specific word, and it finds its ultimate meaning in the historical person of Jesus Christ.
So avoiding these 5 traps requires massive, radical intentionality. We have to retrain our desires.
Yes, a life without intentional rest becomes brittle. You become reactionary. A Sabbath-shaped life requires hard limits. It requires digital restraint. It requires intentionally consecrating time for worship, for prayer, for reading scripture, and for communion with others. The goal isn't legalistic uniformity. Your exact practice might look different from your neighbor's, but the point is consecrated, dedicated time.
So how do we synthesize all of this? We've covered an immense amount of ground today. How do we summarize the core of what we've discovered?
I think we can distill this entire sweeping narrative into 6 core theological principles from Colossus's work. First, rest is theological before it is practical. It tells us that God is sovereign and sufficient. He doesn't need our labor, but he joyfully invites our worship. Second, rest is relational. It is not passive inactivity. It is active communion and trust. Third, rest is moral. It exposes what truly rules the human heart. If we cannot stop, we are enslaved. If we cannot stop, we are enslaved. That cuts straight to the bone. Fourth, rest is restorative. It heals human fragmentation, reordering our work, our time, and our disordered desires. Fifth, rest is eschatological. Every Sabbath points forward as a weekly prophecy of the eternal age to come. And finally, sixth, rest is Christological. Jesus is the absolute interpretive center of the Sabbath. In him, it finds its true substance and fulfillment.
This has been a truly sweeping, majestic journey. We started with a completed masterpiece, a state of perfect delight in the eternal mind of God before time even began. We saw that perfect rhythm woven into the physical dirt of the Garden of Eden, only to be shattered by human self-reliance, giving birth to the agonizing thorns of overwork and despair. We watched God mercifully formalize rest as a humane, protective law for a nation of traumatized former slaves at the foot of Mount Sinai. We saw the sheer tragedy of a people who refused to give up the myth of autonomy, leading to the devastating forced rest of exile.
It's a heavy history.
And then we saw the arrival of the Lord of the Sabbath himself, Jesus Christ. He fulfilled the true meaning of the day in his life, his merciful healings, and ultimately, he achieved ultimate cosmic rest through his finished work on the cross and his victorious resurrection. And now we see the church, caught in the tension of the present day, practicing a weekly rebellious rhythm that stretches forward, anticipating an eternal new creation.
It really is the music of the whole biblical story. And as we conclude, we must understand the ultimate logic of the Sabbath. The final word of the Sabbath is not a negative command. It is not simply stop working.
It's an invitation.
It is the most beautiful, profound invitation in the universe. The final word of the Sabbath is, come home. Come home from your endless anxiety and step into trust. Come home from the exhausting, crushing project of self-salvation and step into grace. Come home from your liturgical exile and step back into the presence of God.
Come home from striving into worship. That is stunning. Let that breathe for a moment. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the learner, with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your week. Building on everything we just discussed about self-salvation and practical atheism, consider this. What if your chronic inability to take a day off isn't actually a time management problem? What if it isn't about your overflowing inbox, or your demanding boss, or the current state of the economy?
What if it's deeper?
Exactly. What if your deep, persistent exhaustion is actually a deeply embedded, unconscious theological argument that you are having with your creator about who is actually responsible for sustaining your life?
It strips away all our excuses and forces us to answer the most fundamental question, who is really God in my life? Me or him.
Exactly. We started this conversation talking about that flashing red battery icon and the frustration of a charger that doesn't seem to work no matter how many vacations you take or how much sleep you get. Maybe the reason the charger is broken is because you've been trying to plug your soul into the outlet of your own productivity. It is a wrong power source. It will never, ever recharge you. It will only drain you until you are entirely empty.
That's profound realization to end on.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. I want to encourage you today, take a breath, log off, put down the heavy, useless yoke of proving your own worth, and genuinely step into the rest that is already entirely finished.